and welcome to Little Learners. Today we're going to be looking at alternative pronunciations and spellings in phonics. Sounds complicated and sometimes it really feels complicated, but let's see if we can simplify it together. Before we get started, don't forget to give this video a like if you find it helpful or interesting, and you can click that subscribe button to join the Little Learners family. Don't forget to also click the bell icon so you get a notification every time I post a new video. So, in phonics we know that we have letters and corresponding sounds. So for example, if we see an A, the sound is an A. But sometimes we have letters that have more than one pronunciation. Or we have a pronunciation that is represented by different letters. Let me explain. Some letters make different sounds depending on the word that they're in. So for example, if we look at EA, in the word bead, that makes an E sound. In the word bread, that makes an E sound. This also means that some sounds have more than one spelling. If we think of the sound ow in the word proud and power, we have it represented by an O and a U in proud and an O and a W in power. So even when children have got to grips with phonics and digraphs and trigraphs and what it all means and what different graphemes or letters represent when it comes to sounds, it still gets confusing. So when children get a bit older and they're moving into kind of phase 5 phonics, they are learning these alternative spellings or pronunciations. Let's look at another example. So let's look at the grapheme or letter Y. In the word yes, this makes a Y sound. In the word cry, the Y makes an I sound. So this is an alternative pronunciation of Y, but also an alternative spelling of the sound I, which can also be represented by an IG and an H, for example. In the word very, the Y represents the sound E. So that's an alternative sound for the letter Y, but also an alternative spelling for the E sound, which can also be represented by EE, for example. So you can see how things can get a bit complicated when children are trying to decode words, which just means to break them up and sound them out, to be able to read them, when sometimes they might be reading a word and the letter that they know makes an E sound is suddenly making an I sound. So it's making children aware of all of these different spellings or pronunciations that can exist with these different collection of letters or sounds. So for example, if they're trying to read the word bread and they're using that EA as an E sound and they're saying b-r-e-d, breed. He ate the breed. That doesn't sound right. Oh, I know. E and A can also make an E sound. Let's try that. B-r-e-d, bread. Ah, he ate the bread. So it's having that knowledge to be able to go back and think, okay, that sound didn't quite work. What other sounds do I know that this grapheme or collection of letters can represent? So I'm just going to show you a few other examples so that you can kind of get more of an idea of how this might work. So if we look at the letter A, if we see this in hat, we know that the A makes an A sound. At, hat. But if we look at the word bath in my accent, and we will get onto accents in a moment, that A becomes an R sound. B-arth, bath. So before a child with my accent knows that that A can make an R sound, they won't be able to sound that word out. However, if they have an accent in which the A in bath still makes an A sound, b-ath, bath, then they can decode it. So we will get into accents because that can make things a bit tricky. So if we also look at the word was, that has an A in it, but now the A is representing the O sound, w-os, was. Let's look at E. So the letter E in the word bed makes an E sound, b-ed, bed. But then if we look at the word he, the E is making an E sound now. E, he. So we've got two different sounds there for that same letter. So the flip side of this is that you then have different spellings for particular sounds. So if we think about the sound, which could be represented by UR in per, It could also be represented by ER in perm, or it could be represented by an OR in worst. If we think about the sound air, which could be represented by AIR in fair, we could also have it represented by ERE in where, or an ARE in share, which itself is an alternative pronunciation of the split digraph AE, A. I will put a link in the description box down below where you can see more examples of this on my website so that you can have a look at those at your leisure and maybe study up on some of them if you're finding it a bit confusing, because this definitely can be confusing. If you speak English fluently, you just take this for granted that we somehow know how to do all of this, but when you're teaching it to children or someone who is learning English for the first time, you really notice how complex and complicated this really can be. So, I mentioned accents earlier, and they definitely play a part. Depending on where you're from and what your accent is like, will determine how you pronounce different sounds. So, for example, you watching may pronounce the A in the word bath differently to me. So I pronounce it bath. You may pronounce it bath or something entirely different. For the word some, I have an sound, but others may pronounce it as son with an o sound. In the word pure, that U-R-E is a your sound for me, but for others it could be a ewer, so pure. So it's a slightly different pronunciation. In the word tooth, I have the oo sound there, but for others it may be more of a tooth. So it does mean that when you are learning phonics and teaching phonics, it really does depend on where you are and what your accent is like. So how do we teach these alternative spellings or pronunciations to children? First of all, we certainly introduce these and explain to children that we know that this combination of letters makes this sound, but now we also know that it makes this sound. Or we know that this sound is represented by these letters, but did you know that in some words it's represented by these letters? We will look at books and read with children particular books that have the alternative spellings or pronunciations in them. These will be purchased by the school for that particular reason, so certainly speak to your child's teacher if you're wondering which books might be helpful to get. Take a look at the reading books your child brings home if they are starting to learn about alternative spellings and pronunciations, and you'll probably notice some of them in there. Other things you can do are simple matching games, so having pictures of different items, so maybe a watch, a bath and an ant, and then having the words written as well, and the children need to match the written word to the picture. Now this may seem really simple because at this stage a lot of children can read pretty confidently, so they will be able to sound out or just read the word ant and match it with the ant picture. But the point of this is that children are then reading and noticing the different sounds that that A can make in ant, bath and watch. So it's really that kind of exposure and playing with those sounds in a fun way to first build a child's confidence, because this game is something that a lot of children will be able to do by matching. And also then when they do come across any difficulties or they have any misconceptions where they are saying the wrong sound for a letter, you can easily pick that up and say, okay, you said aunt. We don't have an aunt picture here, so what do you think we need to do? Maybe we need to change the sound we're using for the A sound. Ant. Oh, we do have an ant picture, and kind of play with that sound and that pronunciation together. You can also use peg games, so for example you might write the word key, K-E-Y, and then also that same word with the wrong spelling, so K-E-E still makes the sound key, or K-E-A for key, and then you have a peg, and children need to look through those different spellings and decide which one is the correct one for the word that they're looking for. Maybe you have a picture for that as well, and they know they're looking for the word key, so which one is the correct spelling? As much as we really do rely a lot on phonics and decoding and sounding out, often a lot of spelling is to do with memorising and really that rote learning, so kind of repetition and getting to know that word by sight. And so these kind of games can help with that, while also exploring the different spellings of a particular sound. You can also have a grapheme wheel where you write different sounds on it, and then you have little pegs that have other spellings of that sound, and children can match them up. So they see that on the grapheme wheel or the letter wheel there is an O sound, an O and an A. So they look at their pegs and they see, oh, okay, I have here O_E, which is representing the split digraph O, and that also makes the same sound as the OA, O, so I can clip those two together. You can also do some simple grapheme sorting, so pictures with their corresponding words on them in flashcards, and then have buckets or bins with the particular letters on them, and children just need to sort them. But again, that is a simple task, which is just helping expose children to these different spellings and getting them used to seeing them in their environment. So I am very aware that alternative spellings and pronunciations can be extremely complicated, but I do hope that this video has helped to kind of uncomplicate it a little bit. If you did find this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, as it really helps out the channel. If you made it to the end of this video, please comment down below with the word wow, because I think that's how a lot of people feel when they learn about alternative spellings and pronunciations. Wow. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to click that subscribe button so you can join the Little Learners family, and I will see you next time.